Believe it or not, there are people out there who believe witches are real. Although the term witch goes back to the Middle Ages, belief in witches, warlocks, and other people with magical powers is as old as humanity itself. The ignorance and fear that shaped the lives of ancient humans, existing in a world that they fundamentally didn't understand, gave rise to magical explanations for natural phenomena. And from these magical explanations came the idea that some people were able to tap into that magic and channel its power. Of course, historically, witches are not just people who are able to tap into this magic. There have been people, usually women, accused of using that power to harm others. In Europe, under Judeo-Christian influence, people accused of practicing witchcraft were claimed to consort with the devil, selling their souls to him in exchange for their powers. "Thou shalt not suffer a witch to live," claims the book of Exodus in the Old Testament. And that godly order was used for centuries to justify the incarceration, torture, and murder of thousands of people accused of practicing the so-called dark arts. Although the bulk of this persecution happened during the Inquisition, European mobs were still hunting witches well into the 19th century. Nowadays, nobody would seriously defend the persecution of witches or the beliefs that led to that persecution. While it is true that neither Catholics nor Protestants have abandoned the superstitions and magical thinking that were behind the obscurantism that resulted in men and women burning at the stake, they no longer look at those superstitions as commanding them to kill witches. Many of the people who participated in the Salem witch trials lived long enough to apologize for their involvement in that savagery, and even the Catholic Church, through Popes John Paul II and Benedict XVI, have apologized for the abuses of the Inquisition. While it's obviously too little, too late, all of these acts of contrition show that at the very least, people have woken up to the illegitimate and nonsensical nature of the mindset behind witch hunts. But witch hunts have never gone away. The fear of people who are different and who are suspected of possessing dark powers continues to infect the minds of many who are willing to do anything to destroy that supposed threat. Saudi Arabia still criminalizes sorcery, and people were beheaded for that crime as recently as 2012. In India, just in the 21st century, hundreds of women have been murdered over witchcraft accusations. In Africa, in places like Nigeria, Ghana, Kenya, and Tanzania, people are routinely accused of witchcraft and assaulted, tortured, murdered, and banished. The African situation is especially concerning, not just because of the horrendous human rights violations affecting those given the nonsensical label of witches, but also because of the way in which some Western scholars have dealt with what is happening. The same scholars that would never justify or defend the horrors of the Inquisition or the hanging of young girls in Salem become moral relativists when the atrocities are perpetrated by Africans following their own customs and traditions. Looking at Africans as noble savages, these scholars see them as almost magical creatures whose traditions, no matter how savage or nonsensical, should never be eradicated from their societies. They see a social function in the belief in witchcraft among Africans, and even in the witch hunts that necessarily come from this absurd belief. Those who can make you believe absurdities can make you commit atrocities, and indeed, the absurd belief in magic and wizardry that underpins religion and superstition is the necessary precursor of witch burnings. Once a society accepts that magical evil exists, that some people are consorting with the devil or with evil spirits, and that they are using evil powers to damage others, atrocities soon follow. After all, if you truly believe that your neighbor is possessed or working with the devil, why wouldn't you do everything in your power to eliminate them? Of course, not everybody who believes in magic or religion is bound to commit atrocities. But witch huntings are not isolated events. They are part of a continuum where faith, belief in the absence of evidence, remains the common factor. Once reason and critical thinking go out the window, all bets are off. I know that as the United States launches another war of aggression and Israel continues to commit a genocide, it might sound silly to focus on something like witch hunts and superstition. But even in those events, we can see the damaging power of superstition and magical thinking, as the non-existent divine promises to a chosen people are used to justify the murder and displacement of the Palestinian population, and radical Christian fascism is used to justify the criminal war of aggression launched against Iran, rehashing nonsensical crusader narratives. Religion and superstition might not be the root of all evil, but they can certainly explain a lot of it. And that is why the situation in Africa is so concerning. Rightfully ashamed by the looting, raping, and genocide carried out by the European settlers, scholars are willing to sanitize and whitewash the atrocities carried out by Africans against each other in the name of their customs and beliefs. It's a condescending racism of low expectations, treating Africans as less than human, as people who cannot be expected to move away from superstition and savagery, leaving the continent as an eternal zoo for scholars to observe and preserve obscurantist beliefs, knowing full well that the price of that acceptance, the price of that obscurantism, will be paid in the blood of Africans. That is why I got in touch with Dr. Leo Igwe, a Nigerian human rights advocate, a committed humanist, and the founder of the NGO Advocacy for Alleged Witches. He holds a PhD from Bayreuth University in Germany, where he researched witchcraft accusations in Ghana, and works every day with people on the receiving end of witchcraft accusations. If you want to know more about this NGO and about the ways in which you can support their very valuable work, please check the links in the description. Leo, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today.
Yeah, it's my pleasure, and thank you for having me.
Tell me a little bit about yourself. How did you end up in this field?
Actually, it was not planned. And even as I speak to you, there's no plan. Okay? First of all, I was born in a rural community in southern Nigeria. Shortly after the Nigerian Civil War, 1967-1970. So I grew up in a typical African village. And when I say village now, I won't want people to confuse that with village maybe when you talk about Europe or the United States. When we talk about village here, then, not now, again, then, not now, you talk about maybe many people we are living in huts, and people, you have footpaths. People move around with footpaths, and there were you see a lot of cricket in the evening, and you see chicken crowing, you see goats moving along the streets, and all that, and yeah, and you have trees. There was no pipe warm water. We go to the stream and rivers to fetch water in the morning, in the evening, and all that. So yeah, so that was it. And again, in terms of beliefs, people have a lot of beliefs in, spirits, sometimes they live in trees. So you see, sometimes you come out, you see some people make some sacrifice near some trees or special forests or places. They kill chickens, sometimes they kill goats. And the funny thing there is that when they kill the chicken, they go home with the meat. They just put feathers there for the gods. So gods apparently eat feathers, and human beings will eat the real chicken, okay? Then the same thing applies to goats. When they kill the goat, they just sprinkle the blood, make some incantation, and of course prepare the meat for the family and all that. So, but when I was 12 years, my mother enrolled me in a seminary, in a Catholic seminary, where I trained to be a priest. And I spent 12 years there training to be a priest. But very close to the ordination, few years to the ordination, I decided to leave the seminary. Actually, it is more of all my experiences within this spectrum of 12 years in the seminary, living partly in the village, and going to also the communities to preach. Yes, I preach in the communities, of course, against traditional beliefs and try to convert people to Catholic Christianity. Yeah. I have to be very particular, not Christianity. Catholic Christianity, because we were told that that's the best. That's best. Others are inferior. But in the course of my training, first of all, after the high school, we were sent to study philosophy. Yeah. I'm not sure why they did that, because actually, immediately you start studying philosophy, a lot of all those teachings, they'll just crumble. You now have to struggle to really make sense of that, because much of the teachings are based on dogma, authoritarianism, orthodoxy. So if you want to really scrutinize, question them, philosophically analyze them, they just crumble. They can't withstand scrutiny. So, well, I got into the training, and actually, by the second year, I was already having some problems with Christianity, the teachings of Christianity, and the Catholic faith, and And I started questioning, some of those teachings. And you know what? They were not making sense to me. My worry is not just that people have teachings, but when you ask questions, they don't have good answers. Sometimes, oh, you need to pray harder. And what does praying harder mean, please? Does it mean praying longer? Or praying by beating yourself on the floor, rolling on the floor? If you have watched some African Christians, sometimes they scream, they shout, and things like that. What does that mean? So sometimes they say, oh, you don't have enough faith. Your faith needs to be stronger. So so there's always this feeling that either you are not holy enough, you are not prayerful enough, or you just need to be more faithful in order for your prayers to be heard. So, but somewhere, as I was growing up, I think that it was all being made up. In fact, for me, I thought it's a scam. Yeah, the whole thing about religion is a scam. Why did I say that? Some people who have not been to the other world, as they were telling us, will come and tell you, okay, look at how it is. You're gonna wear white clothes. You're gonna be singing. You're gonna be surrounded. You're gonna be. They just describe a place they have not been to, even lifestyles they have not actually lived, a life they have not lived, and they are telling you to give them money to take care of themselves here for a life they have not lived, and they don't actually have a very strong argument whether that kind of life is possible. So it sounded that there's something fishy about the supernatural narrative. It's not just the Catholic version, but in all versions, because while I was training, I did comparative religion, and I tried to study other religions, of course, briefly, like Islam, Judaism, Hinduism, and Buddhism. And I now found out that these are just different versions of human effort to make sense of what they don't understand or what they don't know. Yeah. So, and try to be at home with it and try to come up with ethics of how to live and things like that. So that was when actually it's not just all about the Catholic faith. I started moving away from religion and I actually started seeing religion more as a problem. Yeah, because Warren, he presents his teachings as a form of dogma. Don't question it, even when they are questionable. And again, religion is often deployed to justify harm, maltreatment, and abuse. So it was like, oh no, it's not just that the teachings are false or likely false or just superstitious, but they are also used to justify and sanctify harming others, children, women, elderly persons, and others in the sense of religious orders or non-religious orders. So I had a problem with it, and I felt that I needed to take a break from the training and also take a break from the whole entire religion as a whole. So that was how I slowly moved away, and I found out that the humanist philosophy, the humanist outlooks, presents me with something I could relate to and something I could connect with in trying to make sense of the world in a way that constructively, positively, and progressively takes care of some of these issues that religion has failed to address, or religion is actually addressing in a way I find unacceptable.
In the context of Africa in general, and perhaps Nigeria in particular, do you think that Christianity and Catholicism specifically have been a negative force for Africa? Because obviously Christians and Catholics would mention that they have built schools and hospitals there.
I mean, this is a very good question. You see, I will not want us to, first of all, throw away the baby with the bathwater. Okay? Yes. Um, um, I will not come here to tell you that the influence of religion or Christianity in particular in Africa within the context of Christian missionaries, has been entirely bad or evil. But it's important to put that in a context. Okay? Now, yes, the missionaries established the schools, formal schools, we have them today. They also established hospitals and a couple of other institutions that benefited the people. But there is a problem. You know, when somebody presents a school where you get educated, but at the end of the day introduces something that also makes it impossible for you to be fully educated. Yes. In other words, yes, you become literate, you can read, you can write, you know. Now they make it impossible, but they now created a situation whereby, yeah, but you have to use your education to serve a myth, a god, a deity, and a deity of a particular version. Now they hold you hostage while also claiming to be educating you. So that is why, for me, I think that Africans are like people taken hostage, educated while being taken hostage. And it is that hostage aspect that is largely responsible for the problems we have today. So today, a lot of Africans will tell you, I'm a professor, but they cannot question the teachings of their religion. A lot of Nigerians will tell you today, I'm a scientist, but they will tell you that it's justified that anybody who says something critical of Muhammad should be killed, or that anybody who renounces a particular faith should be jailed or should be killed. So it is, it is a mixed bag. Yeah, the situation is like a mixed bag. So we have some elements of, let's say, good stuff in terms of education and in terms of hospitals, but they are ideologically driven in such a way that it holds Africans mentally hostage. And my idea is this: let Africans be intellectually free so that they can build their own hospitals. So don't hold me hostage because you built a hospital for me. I can build a better hospital for myself. So let's assume that, yes, thanks, no thanks. Thanks for bringing the hospitals. But can we now take over these hospitals and begin to make sure that the science of the hospital becomes paramount? Not you build a hospital and in the morning the priest will go around and pray and ask God to heal the sick, and a lot of people, Africans, leave that hospital confused. They don't know who actually heals or helps in the healing or curing of diseases. Is it the doctors and the nurses who take care? Or according to them, is it the priest who comes around to utter some words and invoke God and all that? So Africans, many of us are confused because of the mixed bag influence of Christianity. And we need to begin to question this, unpack this bag, and remove some of those negative and harmful or mistaken ideologies that often do not allow us to make full use of the schools, full use of the hospitals or our health centers, because they are tied to the string of religious dogmas and traditions that at the same time subsumes these so-called scientific enlightenment institutions to traditions that are dogmatic, authoritarian, and supernatural.
I know that Christianity has famously been been a big obstacle in the fight against AIDS, as they oppose the use of condoms and contraception, even though condoms are one of the most effective medical interventions against the spread of AIDS.
Yes, and that's exactly the same thing. They build the hospitals and make you to understand that you have to rely on medicine. But they also have a way of controlling what kind of measures, medical measures, therapeutic measures that are delivered in this hospital. So, yeah, they give it to you, they also take it back or they control it. So that becomes a problem.
At some point in my life, I simply stopped believing in God. Nothing specifically happened. It just didn't make sense to me anymore. So I was wondering, how did that happen to you? And probably more importantly, how was that experience for you? Because I assume that being an atheist in the African or Nigerian context is fundamentally different.
Yeah, this is where insider outsider perspective is very important here. Look, from the outside, of course, it's difficult. But from the inside, people can negotiate their non-belief, especially as they grow older, as they become independent. So what happens, yes, when, for instance, I was born in a rural community, the socialization is mainly about the spirits that control our lives. And a whole lot of events are interpreted animistically, supernaturally, magically. So you see people invoke that. But you also see people make fun of that. Yes. You see people express disbelief, ridicule it, dismiss it. Let me just give you an example. There was an incident in my village as I speak now, and one of the parties went to the shrine to report the case. Others said, I will not go. Some people said, I will not go because I'm a Christian. It's not inconsistent with my faith. Others said, oh, he has gone to the shrine to use the priest there to manipulate the outcome of the dispute. So a lot of people, are also irreligious, even though they identify as religious. It is not just something like a very linear, one line kind of thing. Everybody is religious. No. Sometimes when people are manipulating religion, people know, but sometimes they still identify as religious. So why am I saying that? So when I was growing up, I noticed that people actually, they profess traditional faith when they like, when it suits them. They go to the shamans or they go to the traditional priest when it suits them. Like in this very case, I'm telling you now, the person who went to the shaman is a Christian and calls on God. But when he has problem, he goes to the traditional priest to intimidate, instill fear, in opponents and all that. So that's what I noticed. So people practice traditional faith when it suits them. They practice Christianity when it suits them, and in some cases, Islam. So for me, people are irreligious. Irreligious. They say that they don't actually is anything goes. Some kind of religious anarchism. Anything goes for them as long as it can help them get what they want. Like a friend of mine, he's also an ex-seminarian. He was training and he left. But he told me, for him, he has a pragmatic approach to religion. What does that mean? As long as this faith gets me the results I need, I identify with it. So if it doesn't get me the result, I don't care about it. So a lot of people see Nigerians or Africans as religious. I don't see them that way. Okay. And that's why I remain, I am whom I am, and I navigated it in a way. Yes, when you come out and you go around banging at people's doors, calling them idiots because they're Christians or fools because they're Muslims, of course, you're looking for trouble. You're looking for trouble. But you can be quiet about it, which is, of course, something I also, for me, I have an issue with, because for me, if you are religious and you're loud about it, if you are not religious, you should also be loud about it. What is good for the goose is good for the gander. So what I did, understanding my society, I tried to navigate it slowly with my family, and I never told anybody, but they noticed it, that, oh, he no longer goes to church. He no longer prays, okay? and they start asking questions. And of course, you try to give them some answers, not all the answers. And because you have to negotiate your independence. Is when you depend on them that they now be in a position to ask you questions and also sanction. So when I left the seminary, I moved to another part of Nigeria where Catholic faith is not very strong. And I could always go around and nobody will ask you, oh, why did you leave the seminary training? Why did you leave the Catholic faith? I don't have to answer those questions. So I live in the southwest of Nigeria, where Muslims and Christians and traditionalists coexist. Of course, with some tensions, but not as much violence as we see up north. So what I did, first of all, was to change my location, move away from what you can call Nigeria's Bible Belt. And then I moved to the Southwest, where people don't care so much about religious affiliation. As long as you are religious, people don't care a lot. So then I have worked so hard to be on my own, because also when you are part of somebody's business, they always want you to be also part of their faith, or at least respect their faith. Okay. So, and sometimes many of the offices and businesses, they start with prayer. So I run my own company, I run my own organizations and projects. So that has made it easier for me to not suffer a lot of persecution or oppression. Yeah. So that's how, I've navigated it. Did I ever believe? I used to tell people I never did. Because before I could even understand what you call belief, they have already told me what to say and what to believe. Okay? So I did what my parents told me to do. I, in quote, believed what my parents told me to believe. Oh, these people are here, gods are here, just like a child is taught. So when I started giving those things when I started thinking about them myself, I tried to find out the rationale behind it, the whole thing crumbled. So I moved from believing what I was told to believe to not believing at all. Yeah, in terms of religion.
You said that your parents put you in the seminary at 12. So I'm sorry, but did they expect you to be a priest since you were a child?
Yes. And again, it's not really that, like now, my mother told me that it wasn't really that she wanted me to be a priest, but seminaries were among the best schools. Mission schools were among, and I still think, comparatively, because the government here has not risen up to their duty in terms of making the public schools good enough because of corruption and mismanagement of public resources. So schools managed by Christian organizations or faith groups are often seen as some of the best. So many parents actually send their children to seminaries or Catholic schools or mission schools so that they could get the best of education. But of course, some of us or some of them would eventually ended up, becoming priests or nuns or developing interest in becoming priests or nuns. So I think that's what transpired in my case. That was why when I told my mother that I was withdrawing, she had no objections, because she felt that if I wouldn't be able to do the work of a priest, particularly a celibate priest, which I wasn't in the position to do. I was almost an impossible task for me at some point. So I explained to my mom and she said that was fine. So I didn't have any issue, leaving the training on my own.
Having now covered the issue of your religious upbringing and the change that came when you decided to leave the seminary, tell me a little bit about what happened then, because I know that you did your PhD in religious studies in Germany.
Yes.
And you also did, if I'm not mistaken, some research on the issue specifically of witchcraft in Ghana. What was that process like?
First of all, while I was in the seminary, I noticed a lot of harm that religion does I noticed a lot of harm that was done in the name of religion, and the fact that people got away with the harm. They got away with the abuses and violations. And people who were most affected were poor people, elderly people, people with disabilities. So apart from the fact that, yes, Christian institutions, they established hospitals, they also established schools. Even they also engage in charity, humanitarian work. But too often, all these mechanisms or initiatives blinded the society from speaking out against the abuses in the name of religion. It was used to sanctify the religious privilege. So, but it was hurting, deeply hurting. But a lot of people could not speak out. So we had to live with the hurt. We had to live with the trauma of religious violations. And I found that unacceptable. And yes, I understood that it was going to be quite challenging, difficult, and sometimes dangerous to speak out against religious authorities, but I thought it was necessary. Yes. So I was motivated, not mainly by the dangers. I knew about the dangers, but I found out that somebody has to, at some time, really come out, stick out his neck. Otherwise, change will not happen. I saw that my society needed a lot of change if they can confront the excesses of religion and superstition. So what I did, I now started the humanist movement. In 1996, I founded the humanist movement because I found that, trying to protect, defend humanity, trying to promote humanity of people could give me the anchor I needed to address the abuses, the excesses, the violations that are often committed in the name of religion. Now, I noticed that one of those atrocities, one of those horrible crimes are often committed in the name of witchcraft. Witchcraft here is as used by the English people that colonized Nigeria or many parts of Africa. But for us locally, we also understand what that means. When we say witchcraft, we understand what it means. And that is why, it will be important as I speak here, I'm speaking about witchcraft as I understand it and as it plays out in my society. So what is that? Now, people believe in the supernatural. They believe that there are supernatural agents, there are spirits, there are gods. You sacrifice to them. They could also be unhappy, and they could actually be responsible for some harm that happens to you. But at the same time, there's also the belief that there are some people that could use their own magical powers to harm, cause problem, cause accidents, or death of others. So too often when people suffer misfortune and they really think the misfortunes are not from the gods. Yes. When they say that if they say that from the gods, it means that, oh yeah, they're gonna happen. It's something meant to happen. It's like, that's how God has decided it. But if they think it's something somebody manipulated, now, they now go to places where people could say, yes, we have the power to look into the supernatural world and find out whether this misfortune was actually caused by the gods or caused by those who supposedly have magical or supernatural powers. So when they go to those places, and sometimes, and of course, in many cases, they will now tell them, oh yeah, there's somebody in your family who is behind a particular thing, or who was behind a particular misfortune. And what they do is they will come, attack the person, beat up the person, or banish the person from the community. So the person is punished. Now, this has been going on over the years. And of course, the Western scholars and anthropologists came around and of course described what they saw as African witchcraft. And because I got involved when I finished the seminary, and of course got into trouble with some pastors, particularly there's a Nigerian pastor who claims to be an ex-witch and on a mission to eradicate witchcraft. And you know, when you want to eradicate something that is not there, you know, that kind of thing. So you cannot but abuse, harm innocent people.
I remember that in the 90s, for example, in the United States, there was a whole industry of ex-Satanists that had become pastors and were also eliminating Satanism in the same way. So it is charlatans that are basically exploiting people's ignorance to get their money, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
And
yeah.
just a small question about what you're saying right now. This type of witchcraft, it sounds a lot like the evil eye, you know, this thing that I've heard about in Italians, for example, have it, and it occurred in this mixture of, on the one hand, traditional beliefs and Catholicism, which was also very big in Italy. These accusations of witchcraft and these beliefs in witchcraft that you observe in Nigeria or in Ghana, are they 100% from traditional animists' beliefs, or are they also including Christian beliefs in them?
Let me say they are 100% traditional beliefs, okay? But Christianity came as a reinforcing mechanism because the Christian religion is foreign, you know, was introduced at some stage. So what happened was that African Christian leaders appropriated it because they knew it has some capital. There's some religious capital in witch hunting. So they couldn't leave it for the traditionalists. So they now appropriated it. And that is why today the witch hunters are mainly Christian pastors and in some cases Muslim marabouts and imams and sheikhs. So because they needed to address that spiritual problem for them to be religiously relevant. Yes, because like I said, you know, Nigerians, and if I should say Africans, are pragmatic in their approach to religion. So they're not just confessional in terms of, oh yeah, I profess Christianity and that's it. No, they want a religion that can bring results. So if going to the Marabout will get us the healing or the answers to our problems, they go to Marabouts. They will come out and tell you, but I still believe in Christianity. I'm only looking for solutions to my problem.
Just as a parenthesis, you said Marabout?
Marabout. Marabout are Muslim spiritual experts too. There are Muslim diviners. There are people who could go to, but you know, they are it's all the traditional divination, but with a layer of Islam, you know, some mumbles about from the Quran, verses from the Quran. Sometimes what they do is that they will write the verses of the Quran on a slate, they wash it, and sometimes give it people to drink as a healing substance or healing solution or whatever. So we have of course the Christian pastors. So we have the Muslims. So what happens is that Islam and Christianity came with a lot of force. So a lot of Africans embraced this religion, but they did not abandon or discard their traditional beliefs. So we have traditional beliefs layered with Christianity and Islam. Sometimes a mix of all of them. Yeah, depending on where you live and depending on the problems you have and depending on people you can access. So a lot of Christians go to church during the day. In the night, they go and consult all those shamans and diviners in case they have problems, or if they are traveling, they're embarking on a business, or sometimes they're traveling to Europe and all that, a lot of uncertainty regarding the trip. They may not go to church. They will just go to a local diviner for some kind of consultation and for preparation of some kind of talisman or things they will wear on their body, as they travel. And sometimes also there's what they call the charms, sometimes against bullets, many of them will have what they call anti-bullet charms, so they have in all forms, which they prepare and they give them, so this is how the whole thing plays out with Christianity and Islam and traditional beliefs so fused that they are not as distinct, as compartmentalized as we see it and read about it in the literature.
To ask the question that I think is very common when we discuss superstition, what's the harm? So what is the harm that African people, Nigerians in particular, for example, believe that there is such a thing as witchcraft? What's so bad about that?
It is important that the quest for truth is a natural thing. People want to know what is the case. In other words, if, for instance, if somebody is ill and another person tells you, look, it has nothing to do with maybe microorganism. It has something to do with your neighbors. Okay? Your neighbors are responsible for this. It has nothing to do with your heart condition. It has nothing to do with your sugar level. It has nothing to do with your BP. It has everything to do with your neighbors and their evil magic. Now, one thing about superstition is that it can be used to victimize innocent people. Yes. It can be used to torture and kill innocent people. It is used to misinform and mislead people. And don't tell me that something that misleads, misguides, misinforms people, that is not harmful. So one thing about it is that superstition, first of all, they motivate people to deceive others. Yes, they deceive others. They make people believe something that is not true. They make people believe that falsehoods are truths. So, but it does not just stop at that. They also motivate people to harm others, to commit atrocities. Now, and this is exactly what has been the focus of my work and activism, because I found out that a lot of people want to explain superstition, but they do not want to call out the harm and address the harm and hold those who harm others responsible and accountable. Now, I'll give you a few examples. In Nigeria, there's a belief that you can cut off somebody's head and make incantation with it, and money will come Money will start coming out from their mouth and eyes and others. This is a myth. This is just, it's not true. There's nothing like that. But there's a strong belief in Nigeria that a lot of wealthy people got rich, became rich, because they cut off the head of somebody and they use that to do sacrifice. And look at the word sacrifice, like the sacrifice of Jesus on the cross, or the sacrifice of the goats and rams by Abraham, or Abraham who almost sacrificed a child. So they use this terminology that legitimizes atrocity. Now, last year, a young boy murdered the girlfriend. The girlfriend came to stay with him, and in the middle of the night, he used stones and iron to hit her and drain the blood. The name of that lady is Adijat. And drain the blood, of course, for ritual purposes. But he ran out of luck. People got to know, and he fled. A lot of people in Nigeria are murdered by ritualists, those who are trying to cut their head off, cut their private parts off, cut their intestine. And we have had cases here in my organization where we have ladies who went to a nightclub and from there go to sleep over with a guy, and the guy will kill the person in the night and take the intestine and private parts. For what? Because of the belief that you can use this intestine and private part to do a ritual sacrifice that will make you rich and wealthy. Now, superstition motivates people to commit atrocities. Superstition also motivates people to victimize innocent human beings. We have a case where some young people had an accident some years ago. They were driving in the night. They had no headlight. They didn't have light in their vehicle, so they were driving in the night. So there was a crash, and about 2 of them died. We also told that they were drunk, young people in the night. So they went and consulted, and they said that it was an elderly woman who was responsible for that. So what they did, they came back, dragged that woman out, and beat her to death and dropped the corpse in the bush. In the end of October, an elderly woman living alone also disappeared because a young man accused her of witchcraft, that she was responsible for a lack of progress.
So it's because I know that in medieval Europe, for example, single old women were often the target of these accusations. So in Nigeria, it's also that more likely that old women are witches?
Yes, they are targeted. And let me tell you the reason. Number one, because they are women, and women are seen as vulnerable human beings, politically weak, culturally weak positions. So you can always, overwhelm them. You can always, overpower them. Again, women who are also living alone and enjoying their old age, living longer than others, are assumed sometimes to have spiritual powers. So that what they do is that when they're about to die, they exchange their soul with that of another person. So instead of me dying tomorrow, oh, that child dies. That young man dies in an accident. So when people go to consult the traditional priests, oh, why are we having young people dying and elderly ones are not dying? They say, oh, you don't know that these elderly ones are exchanging their spirits or soul with the young ones. You can see what superstitious narratives, what they can do. They mislead, they misinform, and they motivate people to commit atrocities. So a lot of single women like that are murdered. there was one that was murdered because they said that the brother has died. One of the children has died, and another of the brother went, has some mental health challenge. So, and this woman is just okay, going about business, enjoying her life, very healthy. They said, no, something must be wrong. She must be exchanging, her own misfortune with these people, and that's why. And there's somebody that manufactures these narratives, markets them to the people, because the guy has no real knowledge and explanation to offer to these people. Helpful one. So superstition becomes what charlatans use to justify the money they extort or they take from people who come to them for help.
So the way in which this would work is that, I don't know, there is a drought, for example, and I would come and say, hey, I think that this is caused by witchcraft and I can help you fix it. So that's kind of how that would work. And are these the witch hunters that you mentioned, or is that a different kind of figure in this society?
To become a witch hunter, you don't need a special calling. You just need to make the society understand that, you have some powers.
But what I mean, are these witch hunters part of the clergy? Are, for example, Catholic priests or imams, or are they just kind of random charlatans? I mean, I think that priests are charlatans too, but I mean, are they the same people? A Catholic priest who does mass also does witch hunting, or it would be somebody else who uses Christian symbolism and traditional animism to talk about witchcraft?
All. Let me tell you why it's all of them, okay? Because there are traditionalists who claim to have divine powers, okay? There are elders in the community who think that by becoming an elderly person, you are supernaturally endowed with some powers. You could see into the unseen world. This is apparently narrative they sell to justify being consulted when there are problems. And when you are being consulted, you are coming to consult them with money. So it's an economy. There's always an economy around claiming to have supernatural powers, because you can help solve problems. And as you're solving problems, you're also solving your own, because they were going to give you money to take care of your needs. So a lot of people are self-styled witch hunters. Okay? So when there are problems, they volunteer to help solve it. There are people who are more established. You can go to them and invite them. They will now tell you what it will take, how much money you're going to pay, $500 or 500 euros or whatever. You pay them. They will come and do that. There are also priests who also come around. They are witch hunters. But they will not come and say, oh, I am Reverend Father this, I'm a witch hunter. No. They will come, oh, we need to have a prayer and break the curse in this village. We need to have a prayer and remove spiritual blockage to progress of this community. We need to have a prayer. Those prayer services are witch hunting services. So that, and in fact, we really had to take up a pastor that was 2 years ago, because he organized what they call a deliverance session or ministry service, where he said that witch must die. That was the title of the session.
Let's remember that the Bible says you will not suffer a witch to live. So it is
exactly. Yeah, exactly. So you can see how it is inspired by that. But we already know that immediately you are identified as a witch in the community, as we are socialized, it means that they look at you with cruelty, they look at you unkindly, lack of compassion when they want to treat you. So the pastor was just like bringing all the people who are suspecting someone to come together so that from the service, he could help them identify such people or take measures against them. So it's like witchcraft is like a religious mobilizer, is what you use to mobilize people, bring people together, get people to come around you and maybe seek solutions, seek answers to their problems. So that is what people do, whether they are established priests or members of the clergy, or they are elders in the community, or they are self-acclaimed, self-identified, self-styled exorcists who will always volunteer and let you know that they are there to provide their services if they are consulted. So we have them around.
One of the things that we see when we discuss, for example, the Salem witch trials in the United States or the burning of witches in Europe is that we look at those events as demonstrations of the stupidity, perhaps superstition, lack of education, and atrocities of the societies in which they happen. In other words, nobody looks at the witch burnings of Europe as positive in any way, shape, or form. Nobody looks at the Salem witch trials and the hanging of those girls as a positive. When anthropologists and sociologists look at witchcraft and these superstitions in the African context, based on what I've read that you have very kindly presented to me, it seems like the bar is different. In other words, they judge this superstition very differently when it's those Africans doing it. So yes. What is the situation there?
I'm one of those who grew up brainwashed and thinking that the white man knows it all. Just go to him and learn. Let him inform you about everything, including what is going on in your system. Okay? So that's how we were brought up to look up to, white people and think that they don't go wrong. They don't get anything wrong. And if they say something, it is true. Even if you think it is true and a white person says the opposite, you discard what you think is true and take his own. There's this kind of blind belief that if you are European, you are white, you are, you know it all. In fact, you are an epitome of wisdom. Okay? So I had a culture shock when I came to study about research on witchcraft in Africa, and I was reading what they were writing. And I'm like, what is this? So, and first of all, I struggled with it because I came with this idea that, oh yeah, these guys conducted the research. They were there according to the anthropological test. They did the observation. They did all the methodologies. They had their everything analyzed. They had a concept. All these words, they make you understand that immediately a white person writes anything. Look, it is almost the truth. Just take it home. Don't question it. So I had to really go through a process of discarding this kind of disposition towards the writing. And it was a struggle that lasted even till the end of my PhD, okay? Because I was trying to challenge one of the authorities, in quote, Western authorities, not authorities for me, your authorities, okay? That's Peter Geshire, because I read what he wrote in terms of modernity of witchcraft. I had a problem even with that concept. What do you mean by modernity of witchcraft? I thought that witchcraft and the idea of modernity should be in conflict, should be in contradiction. So why are you modernizing? What are you actually modernizing when it comes to witchcraft in Africa? Again, I struggled with it, and a lot of people will tell you, oh, you don't understand this. But it now occurred to me in the course of it all that no, when they want to talk about witchcraft in the West, they speak about it differently. And now when they talk about witchcraft in Africa, they speak about it differently. This was a shock. I must tell you, it was an utter shock. And I'm like, why? Why is it? And I had my colleague, a German colleague, in the class, in the course of our lecture, and we're in the same program. So, and during one of our classes, he said that for them in the West, witchcraft is a form of superstition. But for those of us in Africa, that witchcraft is not. I was mad. I said, is what? If it is not superstition, what is it? He didn't tell me. He only told me that for them in the West, it's superstition. Yes, everybody understands that. But for us in Africa, it is not superstition.
It's the racism of low expectations, I guess, because it is basically thinking, well, you cannot expect more from Africans. So
Exactly. And they don't want to say it. Why I found it annoying is that they don't want to come out openly and clearly and say, hey, guys, you guys are still living at the primitive stage and all that. And you know what? It became a standard in writing about the topic when it comes to Africa. And when you read Adam Ashford, when you read Peter Geshure, when you read a lot of the Western authors, you will get something like, oh, for those of us in the West, witchcraft, is a superstition, is rational, but for Africans it is not. It has logic in it, and it has reason. It makes a consistent belief, and they will go on and on talking rubbish. Completely. They will just be talking nonsense. And you'll just be reading it from one page to another. At a point, you find out that you have finished a book or you have finished an article. Just reading how witchcraft makes sense to Africans. They don't say it makes sense to James, Peter. They don't, individuals that they met. They use it. They generalize. And that's my problem. Okay? So this was what I noticed, and I now, started having issues, trying to read. But I found out that it has always been there. When I went back to Evans Pritchard and his explanation of witchcraft among the Azandes, and it's just the same thing. Oh, for us in the West, it's irrational, but for Africans, it's a rational system of explaining.
it looks like they're saying it's as good as it's going to get. We cannot expect more from them.
Yeah. And that is why people who do what I do, nobody reckons. We are like, outliers. You guys are just disturbing Africans. They are happy with this superstition. They're happy with what they're doing. Look, let me tell you, it's a disservice. It breaks my heart that people, make a career out of writing about witchcraft in this way. And that's why I told them when I went to the United States, I told them they should shut down African Studies Department. Because what they are doing there is just to recycle stereotypes, legitimize stereotypes. And this idea of talking about Africans in a very condescending way, as if we are different. And I told them, listen, guys, we are not. Yes, we are not. We just happen to live in one part of the world. And culturally, the way we relate, of course, we can see what is going on today in some parts of the world where one government, we said, you can't have your government, you can't have people, we have to tell you what to do and things like that. So we have some other experiences that make things the way they are. But I found out that they made a scholarship out of racism or racist explanation of this phenomenon. And it has become the norm, the academic norm. And a whole lot of Africans are now jumping at it because of the funding and financial security. And now, let me also say this. Look, in a way, I don't blame Western anthropologists. I don't. Because they only wrote what, like they said, what they know, or what they think they know, or what they think they saw, or what they think they're seeing. Okay? What about Africans themselves? Why? What stops us from challenging and disrupting this explanation? So if you ask me, I put the blame and responsibility squarely on African scholars because many of them, because of concerns about funding, okay, jobs, academic jobs, especially when they have to work in the West, in Europe or America, they want to head African Studies Department, paid good salary. They cannot tell them, hey guys, what we are doing here is just racist scholarship. What you are doing here is just rubbish. Yes, when you say it, it could help people to rethink what they're doing. But nobody wants that because no, let's not rock the boat. Even though the boat is taking us down the ocean, okay, in terms of explanation and representation of the phenomenon. So that's exactly what happens. And again, some African universities here also rely on funding from European universities, from American universities. So they always don't want to challenge them. In fact, I visited a director of African Studies Institute, here in Nigeria, and I asked him, I said, why are you guys tolerating these things? These things, there are issues. I have issues with this. Why are you guys tolerating it? He just he lowered his voice and told me, he said, look, these guys bring the funding and they dictate everything. Okay? So African scholars, they're powerless. They're just like toothless bulldog. They just can't speak. They can't do anything. So, and as a result of that, this continues. So there's a need for us, especially Africans, to begin to reframe, reconceptualize, reinterpret the way African and African cultural phenomena have been presented by the West. I mean, I was disappointed because when I went to the university, I noticed that there are sacred cows in terms of authors and books and all that. I'm like, wait a moment, this is not a church. You have to respect this person is a bishop of African witchcraft. No. And meanwhile, these are people who are not Africans and who barely lived here. And when they come here, they stay in the best of hotels. They don't actually stay where the accusations and the contestations and everything take place. Now they go back and write a whole lot of work, and that becomes the basis of understanding this. So what I'm saying is that it is no longer about debate. It is no longer about evidence or experience. It's now about, okay, oh, he's European, he's American, and he went to study in South Africa. He's an authority on witchcraft. And when you read it, so superficial, a whole lot of conflation. You can't make a distinction between religion and witchcraft. In fact, there was a book I read some years ago. It was on traditional religion in Ivory Coast. And I was told at a point, they now changed the title to Witchcraft in Ivory Coast. So you cannot make a distinction between traditional religion and witchcraft, which is rubbish. Complete nonsense. Look at it, because witchcraft is just like the way it is in Christianity. It is an item of belief within the umbrella of supernatural religion that is traditionally rooted. But for the Western outside observers, they don't even know it. And they can't say, sorry, I don't know. Yes. Can you inform me? So that is a challenge.
I do wonder to what extent there are a couple of things there. On the one hand, Western scholars don't want to be accused of being racist by saying that African superstition is nonsense, in the same way that superstition of any place is nonsense, coupled with a consolation prize for a continent that has been looted, raped, and destroyed by the West, so that we can say, well, it is true that you suffer all of those things, but there's some magic in you. There is something about your culture and your tradition that you get to keep, and that it has magic and community and all of that. Never mind the fact that we in the West have accepted that we need to move on from that, and that the key to progress comes from abandoning superstition and magical thinking.
there's a whole lot here playing out. First of all, the issue of calling out African superstition and accusation of racism. Now, listen. Look, Joel, look. The West is also founded on superstition. What is the Pope doing in Rome? What is he doing there? Yeah, what's he doing there? Archbishop of Canterbury is there. In fact, now they have I think they have a woman as a leader. There's a whole lot of disagreement, and Nigerian Anglicans are trying to pull out. Now, the idea of Jesus is a superstition. I don't know what Jesus means. So, that kind of thing. So, let me tell you the problem. The problem is, how do I say it? It's a bit of that racism double standard. Listen, I have my superstition, but I call out your own superstition. Yes. Now, the Westerners who came to Africa, we are not superstition free. They came with Jesus. They came with Christian teachings. They came with, turning water into wine or something, feeding 5,000 people with 5 fishes and all sorts of nonsense. All these are magical oriented practices. But you know what? Our own is better. The thing is this. Don't expect superstitions to play out the same way. It plays out differently, but superstition is superstition. Now, instead of them saying, for us, we still maybe make the sign of the cross, or we still alter some words of prayer in our churches, talking to gods and things like that. Why these people, they do it differently? You see, how do I explain this? You see, when you see an African priest pouring libation means you have some wine in a cup and you pray and you pour it on the floor and you'll be talking to the gods. It's not different from what the priest does in the church. It's not different from what the imams are doing in the mosque. But, Western scholars, they have a background of a superstition they are familiar with. Then they now went to a culture observing superstition they are not familiar with. So they now explain it as if their own is better than that. It's not better. You went and wasted resources building a gigantic house to a spirit and tell me it's the house of God. You get it? You call it a church or you call it a mosque. Look at how much Africans West going on pilgrimage. They can't go this year because of what is going on in the Middle East. And it does not even get them to start thinking, what are we really going there for?
Yeah, I was recently talking with some friends who were not Christians. They didn't have Christian upbringing, and I told them, like, everything that is in Israel right now in regards to Christ is made up. I mean, nobody knows where the burial happened. Nobody knows where he was born. It's just a place to go and like do nothing. I mean, because there is the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. It's nothing. I mean, it's just a church.
Yeah.
So it's incredible, all of the waste that happens in connection to that, and we don't even need to get into all of the amount of money that Muslims pay in order to go, at the very least, to go once to Mecca in their lifetime.
Even there's what they call the Wailing Wall, where people go and they'll be there.
The piece of the wall of the second temple, I think it was. And they do the headbanging.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's. I mean, I find all of these things. Because I'm trying, when I talk with you, of course, I try to play the devil's advocate and ask questions of like, well, what is this or what is that? But frankly speaking, I mean, all of this to me is nonsense. I mean, it's nonsense. It's ridiculous, it's nonsense. And it's particularly ridiculous when you see political leaders participating in this nonsense.
Yeah. And you see Nigerian political leaders who are Muslims, they go to Saudi Arabia, they wear this white cloth, and they go and throw stones. They stone is it Kaaba, or, there's this Muslims, when they go on Hajj, pilgrimage to Saudi Arabia, part of the ritual is that they stone Satan. They throw stones on Satan. and there is this kind of is it either a rock or something at the center, well decorated. So when it's time to throw stones, you see adults, picking stones from the floor like children and be throwing, and they say that throwing stones are Satan. Come on. Now, people who practice this will come back and be laughing at African superstition. Come on, give me a break. Give me a break.
Well, I remember having a conversation once many years ago with some Catholics, and we were all talking about how silly Scientology is,
Yeah.
this American cult,
Yeah.
because they believe in aliens and a number of nonsense things. But I mentioned at the same time, we need to be clear on the fact that there is no such thing as a virgin birth, guys, right?
Yes.
Like, we know this, right? Like nobody
Yeah.
went to heaven. And
Exactly.
no, that's different. That's different.
Yes,
So,
exactly.
whatever you grew up with is not superstition. It's just true, right? But in the case of the African context, I think that the problem is not, at least if people looked at African superstition as nonsense, at least that would be progress, I think, because instead they're looking at it as an integral part of African culture, something that should not be removed from African culture.
Exactly. Now, that makes our work, the work like the one I do, so difficult. And you hardly get support. Meanwhile, what we are doing is what has to be done. Okay? So when we are campaigning against witch persecution, trial by ordeal, jungle justice. In fact, I had a meeting with some US officers, not government officers, but an agency. And one of them was saying that jungle justice was part of African culture. I was shocked. I said, who told you?
I'm very sorry for the question, but when you say jungle justice, that sounds like a TV show about lawyers who work in the jungle. So what is jungle justice?
Yeah, for instance, if you catch a thief, you set the thief ablaze, you beat the chief, you beat the person to death. Mob action, taking laws into your own hands. So when and she said this with a straight face. I'm like, hey, please. Then I used to tease them. I said, okay, suicide and gun violence is also part of American culture. Make me a professor. Yeah, make me a professor of American studies. Yeah, because I've come up with a new theory.
But also this jungle justice approach was part of every culture everywhere in the world. That is why we developed a justice system. So it is obscene. I really find it so offensive. It is obscene to look at this situation in Africa and think, oh yeah, but that's their culture. It was also our culture. We just agreed on the fact that it wasn't appropriate. Why would it be appropriate for people in Africa?
Yes.
I cannot understand how it must feel for you as an African person, because to me it's difficult. It's insulting.
It is insulting. It's frustrating. It's annoying. It's disappointing, because sometimes you look up to people and thinking that, oh yeah, this person will be of help. Like the work I do now, a lot of people, you get this kind of surreal silence from people. Come, let's get rid of this. They now, they're not interested. In fact, when I came out with the vision, I call it 2030 vision of ending witch hunt in Africa. One of my European friends, he sent me emoji of laughter. Yeah. Kind of that I was fooling myself. For me, it's just like, and you know what? I'm saying that we have to end killing our mothers, killing our elderly people, murdering our children in the name of witchcraft. Is that a wrong vision to set for yourself? It's not. And I expected that a lot of people will come on board, but they are not, because they think that,
because they think it's racist to support eliminating a part of African culture.
Exactly. how dare you think that Africans will get rid of witch hunting? How dare you? You know, that kind of thing. That's exactly the impression you get. And it breaks my heart. You get it? But you know what? There are African scholars who have also bought into that narrative. Yeah. So because I can excuse Europeans because they don't know. Yes. You know, I told you before, I thought they knew. No. And now they don't know. I can excuse them. It is not happening in their society. They didn't grow up with it. And they only read about Africa in books and what they see, you know, maybe in magazines and things like that. And when they come here, they stay in the best of hotels and come around and look at those Africans out there, you know, that kind of thing. So there's always that we are here, they are there kind of thing. Now, what about Africans themselves? Why is it that they have refused to lead the way? Because when we talk of African enlightenment, I mean enlightenment in the same respect, but that speaks to the situation in Africa. Who will lead it? It's Africans themselves. And it's Africans who are ready to stake everything. Yes, their lives, their financial security, but nobody wants that. Instead, they are ready to play second fiddle.
Do you think that part of the reason why there is this resistance within Africa to give up on this superstition has to do with, well, the history of colonialism, dispossession, and genocide that came at the hands of European settlers? Do you think that that history has made Africans want to preserve everything and try to be as protective as possible of their customs because they have lost so much already?
See, you know, one thing about explanation is, if you're not careful, it becomes justification. What do you want to preserve? Killing your mothers? Look at it. What do you want to preserve? Lynching innocent women? Setting them ablaze? People who did nothing?
When it comes to your own work, what is the organization that you are heading, and what is it that you are doing to help the mostly women in Africa who are being affected by this atrocity? And I say Africa, but in this case, I think we're referring just to Nigeria, right? That would be your center of operation.
Well, the thing is that when I returned from my studies in Germany, that was in 2017, I came back disappointed. I came back feeling unhappy. I felt back, in fact, almost demotivated in the sense that I was shocked by what was going on in the name of mainstream scholarship and African studies. And I was seeing certain things that a lot of people seem not to pay attention to. In fact, I just felt that what goes on in the name of African studies should be stopped. They should disband African studies programs in Europe and America. That's what I felt. Because when I go to African Studies Conference, I'm like, wow, what is this? What's going on here? You get it? And you know, there are a lot of Europeans, there are a lot of Africans there, all of them keep this face as if there's something special going on there. And I'll go from one session to the next session. Either they are looking backward, oh, how were Africans living? They were not there. Many of them were not born then. I wasn't born then. But they will be presenting how Africans were preserving water, how Africans were doing one thing or the other, not today, but in the past. So I noticed that everything about Africa, we are mainly looking to the past. We are romanticizing the past. We are somehow making Africans to understand that academic excellence, the excellence of African, lies in the ability to recall the past, represent the past. And I'm like, It was more or less the norm. And you see a lot of professors, white professors, European professors, all of them moving around based on their ability to analyze and present Africa this way. And I'm like, sorry, this is nonsense. Complete nonsense. But of course, they had the faculties, they provide the funding, they provide the research grants and research guidelines. So most times, what they want me to research is not what I want to research. What they want me to write is not what I want to write. In fact, there is this obsession now with indigenous knowledge. And I keep asking some of my friends, what is indigenous knowledge? I'm here speaking English.
This nonsense of other ways of knowing that
Exactly.
that it basically says the rest of the world has managed to progress through the scientific method, but maybe
Yes.
gut feeling is gonna work out here. No, it's atrocious.
Good. So they will not compel Africans to be looking for other ways of knowing, which is energy they could have used to contribute to the scientific way, which is always there, open for revision and reinvention and new discovery. So you don't see Africans in terms of presenting cutting-edge research. In fact, there was one recently, there was a PhD defense, and the African came in kind of with fire, some fire on the cap and all that. And somebody commented, amazing. Amazing what? You know, they have a way of applauding Africans, applauding them while they try to present Africa as a place where primitive thought is glorified and celebrated and is topic for PhD thesis. And they will tell you, oh, wonderful. Oh, see it. I cannot believe this. And people who are saying this, they know better. You get it? And they're actually laughing at Africans. And a lot of Africans are now following head over heels, trying to tell them how Africa is a bastion of indigenous knowledge. What does that mean? And they will tell you, oh, Europeans, you know, they have all this science, you know, and look at what science is doing today. We need to rediscover the indigenous knowledge. And when they say it, they'll put up this face as if you should take them seriously. Instead of telling them, please, get out of the room, get out of the table. You are talking nonsense. You are presenting Africans in a very racist way. So
and not just that, I mean, it also
it
condemns the entire continent to being a servant of the West. I mean, because you're never going to develop. It's just creating a new slave class.
Exactly. Do you get it? So, like now, I'm trying to roll out. Okay, I will talk about my program, but I'm trying to, in addition, I'm trying to roll out a program on critical thinking for African schools. Okay? Now, I discussed this with one of my European friends. You know what he asked me? Where are you getting the ideas from? I'm like, oh, okay. I can't think of those ideas myself. I must copy them from somewhere. You know, that kind of thing. So I'm not even worthy. Do you get it? I'm not intelligent enough to contribute ideas in terms of critical thinking. Okay? Now, I made a presentation in the US. Somebody came to me privately. Where are you getting the ideas from? I just looked at him. So I had two people ask me that question. Because for them, no. If I have to talk about critical thinking, I must be getting it from somewhere. Okay? Now, listen. I'm talking about critical thinking as applies to my society where I grew up. Critical thinking that speaks to the curriculum that I used to study, the schools where I studied, and to the school programs I was a part of. And somebody who was not part of my society, who didn't study with me, and I tried to present an idea, he asked me, where are you getting the ideas from? You know, because I can't get those ideas on my own. I must copy them from a white person. So immediately you mention a white person, European, I say, okay. Because they know as an African, you can only have indigenous knowledge. You can't talk about critical thinking. They get it. You get what I'm saying? So there is, and do you know what? It's not, like I said, I can excuse them. What about Africans themselves? Why can't they challenge this? Why can't they disrupt this? Why can't they step out? Like now, I came back. I started the advocacy for alleged witches. Immediately I announced it, all my friends said, Leo, change the name. People will misunderstand you. They will think you are a witch. I said, I will not change the name. Get used to it. There are no witches. So when I'm advocating for people who are being accused, who are being persecuted based on those allegations. And you know what? Witchcraft accusation is against the law in Nigeria. So our law is a facility advocating for alleged witches and against witchcraft allegation.
And what are you doing in this organization of advocacy for alleged or accused witches?
What I do is I want to fill the gaps that made it possible, gaps that have made it possible for accused persons to be treated with cruelty, with are denied access to justice, they are persecuted, and they are tortured and killed. So there are gaps in our laws. Like I told you, in our laws in Nigeria, witchcraft accusation is a crime. But it is not enforced. Even many of our police officers do not even know, our law enforcement agencies. They don't know. In fact, some of them are calling for witchcraft to be criminalized so that we can bring some of these witch hunters to come and present evidence in court. So because of that ignorance, so what we are doing is that we fill the educational gap and awareness gap. We organize seminars and let people know that witchcraft accusation is a crime in Nigeria. We also try to help them get to safety, especially when they survive persecution or attacks.
You refer to on this issue of protecting people, you've referred to witchcraft when we were preparing this interview, for example, you referred to it as this accusation as a silent killer in Nigerian society.
You know why? Because accusers are often in stronger political position. So they can harm, they can kill, they can abuse, they can eliminate the accused and get away with it. And it's because this has been happening over the years. So that is why when I came, I said, no, we have to now move against the killers and the accusers. It's like, no, you're not going to succeed. The norm is more of the other way. But I told them, but the law is against it. So we have a mechanism we can use to fight. So what we are doing is that we try to fill in this gap: legal gap, human rights gap, educational gap, justice gap, policing gap, prosecution gap. So there are so many gaps. So that's what we're trying to fill. And we hope that by filling these gaps, accusation will slowly reduce, because people will get to know that there are consequences. Because right now there's a lot of impunity. People think that they can get away with it. So we're addressing that, so that when you make accusation, you should know that there will be consequences.
When I studied the issue of blasphemy accusations, for example, in an Islamic context, I remember that the Supreme Court of Pakistan, even though in Pakistan blasphemy is still a crime, which is atrocious, they issued a report where they mentioned that although there are some people who report others sincerely, meaning that they do believe the person committed blasphemy, accusations are often used to settle scores, to try to get financial benefits. Is that the same with witchcraft accusations in Nigeria?
Yes, but I'm always pointing out that very, very often we get this kind of what I call academic explanation, okay? And there's a tendency to allow that academic explanation to minimize the severity, the force of accusation, and the negative impact. Okay.
I mean, in the case
Now,
of just to clarify my point, in the case of Pakistan, I mean, these are people who end up getting killed. It's just that, for example, I have a brother and we have an inheritance. Accusing him of blasphemy and him getting killed means I get the entire inheritance. So I think that they recognize the impact. They're just saying that often these accusations are used not for religious purposes, but for really material purposes. And I was just curious as to whether that also happens there.
Yeah, you see, I get the point you're trying to make. You know, and I want you to understand this. People believe that others can harm them through supernatural means. We're not discussing here whether it's useful or not useful. People are brought up to believe that others can harm them through supernatural means. And as, you know, immediately you're able to certify that somebody harmed you through supernatural means, you can go out against the person. So in Nigeria, people are socialized to believe that people can harm them through supernatural means. People can turn into snakes, and they can turn into dogs. They can turn into birds. There's some of these animals, insects, snakes, so that sometimes when they see those animals, is a sign that witches are around or witches are operating. Okay? So it is a belief system. There's a belief system there. Now, do people use it? The answer is yes. But for them to use it, it has to be useful. It has to be forceful. It has to be credible. Yes. And that's number one. Number two, there are institutions that invest legitimacy on these beliefs, or invest these beliefs with legitimacy, like the traditional priests. When you go to them, you go to the pastors and all that. So I want to say, yes, people use witchcraft accusation to settle scores. Yes, they do that, but it is within a society where they believe in the potency. They believe it, because I want to ask you, why are people not using it in Europe to settle scores? Why are they not
because
using
it wouldn't work. I mean, obviously, because it wouldn't work here, but it does work in the case of blasphemy. Like the reason why you would use it to settle score is because you know it works in that society, and that is kind of what I was curious as whether accepting, of course, that there is this large superstitious belief in Nigeria, whether when you look at the accusations, you notice the sincerity of the accuser, not the sincerity of the people who engage in the social punishment of the witch, who obviously believe in it, but rather are people just doing it because it helps them to get a secondary benefit. But it's not really an important, I think, distinction, because the important thing is what the outcome is, and the outcome is the human rights violation.
Yes, but do not forget that accusations are not always or often validated by the virtue of what the accuser says, but sometimes by the fact that the accusation has been certified by a priest or a witch hunter. So what happens from the accusers are moral, like suspicion.
So it is illegal for me to say Leo Ingwe is a witch, but it would be legal for me,
legally speaking.
But it would be legal for me to be a witch hunter.
Good. It's an interesting question. The thing there is that nobody goes with the badge witch hunting. That's a problem. That's another thing. Nobody goes with it. In fact, when you ask witch hunters, are you a witch hunter? They will say no. Okay? But you have a problem. People are dying in your community. And we are brought up to believe that when people are dying this way, there must be somebody in the community who is responsible. We need to go and find somebody who can come and render the service and use his or her ability to help us find who is the one responsible for the deaths in the community. Have I mentioned witchcraft? I have never mentioned witchcraft. Okay? So you are the one putting the label witchcraft and witch hunting on it. The person is coming in as a spiritual service provider, as somebody to help the society heal and get rid of sudden deaths. I mean, who will not welcome that? So, but that's why I said even the term witchcraft, witch hunting is very controversial and is often presented in a way that misrepresents the whole thing. So what happens is that these people do not present it as witch hunting. It's those who are victimized that can present that as witch hunting in order to prosecute, punish, and stop that. They present it as, we want to break generation curse. Oh, there's a curse in this community, we want to break it. We want to get this house, this family to experience breakthrough. So we need to organize a community prayer. So they come to pray. They didn't come to hunt witches, like you're saying. Okay? What happens is that they don't go with this term, witch hunting. They come as community service, exorcism, deliverance, praying for the family or community, praying for prosperity, praying against enemies. So this is why this actually goes on. But when people now are identified, beaten up, they can now use witch hunting and witchcraft accusation as a way to frame as criminal what these people are doing in the name of religious service. And by so doing, go after them to try and, of course, punish them or let the law, apply the law against what they did.
Leo, as I mentioned to you before, the first time that we spoke, I truly admire the work that you're doing. I will make sure that there is a link to your organization so that people can support it and become aware of the enormous efforts that humanists in Africa in general, and you in particular, are doing to free Africa and Nigeria in your case of superstition and magical thinking in a way that allows Africa to develop in the same way that the rest of the world has developed, and free from these chains of the manifestations of this same untruth, which is magical thinking and superstition. And as a humanist myself, and as a person who believes in human rights, I just the only thing I can do is to say I thank you so much for the enormous effort and the sacrifice and the work that you do to help these people free themselves from these chains and saving all of these people who are accused of this nonsense, idiotic term of witchcraft. So thank you so much for everything that you do.
Yeah, I also thank you for your time, and thank you for creating this platform. And it's also, like I said, it's not a lot of Europeans and a lot of Americans that understand how I am approaching this. And they, of course, think that you are not happy with them, or they think you are against them, or you are undermining their own scholarship and authority. Not necessarily, but I think that there's a whole lot of misinformation and misrepresentation out there. And thanks to people like you, and thanks to the platform you just created or just given me, I hope that we can call out those misinformation and begin to relate to Africa and African situation the way we relate it like in other parts of the world. For me, that's a sense of humanism, you know. Otherwise, it makes a nonsense of the concept if you have to let Africans understand, oh, you can make science out of superstition. But for us, it's superstition. It's something for us, it's something different for us. No, we are all human beings, and I'm happy that you are doing what you're doing, and that we can help advance the cause, not just for Africa, but for humanity at large.